Hello and welcome. In this episode we're going to dabble into 8-bit home computers and specifically the Toshiba MSX, and this is one of my personal favourites from back in the 80s. So let's roll the titles and we'll get into this. Now, this is not going to be a pickup video or me trying to purchase a wildly overpriced and almost dead piece of hardware from eBay or CEX. Oh no, we're going to use emulation. And for this emulation project, we will be using Retro Virtual Machine. So let's open the browser and let's get to this website, retrovirtualmachine.org. Now, as you can see, this emulator covers a variety of 8-bit devices, which I will cover in future videos. It's available for Mac, Windows and Linux, but we're using Windows in this video, so let's get this downloaded. Now it's downloaded, let's go to the Downloads folder. We will need to extract this, simply right click and select Extract All. Select the location, so let's click Extract. The default is the Downloads folder and what I'm using. When this completes, return back to the Downloads folder. And we can now rename the extracted folder to just Retro Virtual Machine. Once renamed, I'm moving this to the local disk C for ease of going forward. Now that's moved, I'm going to quickly make a folder structure to keep things tidy. Let's go into the Retro Virtual Machine folder and create a new folder called MSX. Now we'll go into the MSX folder and create two new folders, one named Games and the other Firmware. Let's go back up the folder structure so we're back in the Retro Virtual Machine folder and we'll create a cheeky desktop shortcut. Simply right click, drag and drop onto the desktop and select Create Shortcut. Now we have the initial structure set up, we can launch Retro Virtual Machine. And we're greeted with this cool looking interface. So let's start with creating our emulated MSX. Click on the menu or burger button in the top left corner and then click Create Machine. As you can see, this emulator supports additional devices, but for now we'll just click MSX. Click on Next, select MSX1, click Next, select Toshiba and again Next. We want the HX10P 64K PAL version. Click this, followed by Create. We now need to save this configuration for the MSX, so let's navigate to our Retro Virtual Machine folder and the MSX folder within. Name the file MSX and click Save. This has now added the MSX and all we need to do is click to launch it. We're met with this firmware issue, so we need to solve this before it will work. We'll click the X in the top right corner to close the machine. So let's now check what we need in regards to firmware, and to do this, we need to click on the burger button again. Select the firmware vault, and this shows us what firmware or BIOS files we need. So now we know what we need, let's hunt these down on the internet. Please note that the firmware and BIOS files are copyright protected, so I can't tell you where to go for them. Although these websites for retro stuff can be very helpful, if you want to wear a three-pointed hat. So we now have our firmware files downloaded. Let's go to the download folder and close the browser, etc. Launch Retro Virtual Machine if you closed it like I did. Click on the burger button, then Firmware Vault. Let's move these firmware files into the MSX firmware folder we created earlier. In my case, this is in the local C drive, Retro Virtual Machine folder, and then the MSX folder. Highlight both of these firmware files and then drag and drop them into the Retro Virtual Machine. The firmware should now update with installed. We can now close the downloads window. I personally close Retro Virtual Machine and restart it here. Click on the MSX machine we created earlier, and the firmware error should now be gone. Let's just quickly power the MSX Virtual Machine on. And there we have it. The MSX has booted. Ah, the nostalgia from that screen alone. Anyways, we're not done yet. Let's power this down, get some games, and do a few fine-tuning bits. Let's pop back onto the internet and have a little search around for some games. You may find these sites useful when looking. It may also be worth noting that this emulator works well with these file extensions. Anywho, after you locate your games, go to the downloads folder and let's move them from the downloads folder and to our MSX Games folder. Going back into Retro Virtual Machine, launch the MSX, and let's quickly test a game. Now that we know this is working, let's eject the game and go through the options available for this virtual machine. So here we go. Across the top from left to right, the burger button. This allows you to load and save state the MSX. This is ideal for when you've changed your settings or even if you're mid-game and want to save your progress. The power button, this is self-explanatory. Pause, this pause states the MSX session. Warp, this is ideal for when you're loading tapes, it speeds up the load time. Reset, this will reset the MSX to its saved state. The screen option, here you select the style of screen you want and all that goes with it. I would suggest finding the right balance for your choice in here. Personally, the only things I change is the background blur, amplitude, and flicker. But you do you. Audio settings are next. In here you can set how loud you want the system to be, the mix of the audio and even the volume of the tape deck screech as it loads. Again, adjust to your own flavour. Devices, an option that will permit add-ons if the system has any, like disk drives, memory expansions. The MSX here does not have any. The joystick option sets if you want to override the joystick with keys. Cycling through this shows you what's available and the keys that are defined for this feature. The volume slider, an easy way to change the volume level overall. The tape icon, this allows you to load a tape-based game. The cartridge icon brings up the cartridge slot to load a game. Zip folder for some reason doesn't appear to work for me on this system. Then we have the usual minimize, full screen, maximize, and exit. If you keep the screen surround option available, this little panel here, you can rotate through various visuals, the tape info, an FPS counter, the date and time, and LCD off. If you want to add a controller to the system and use it as a joystick, I would suggest closing the virtual machine and its window. Click on the burger button in the top left corner, select Configure Gamepads, connect your controller. I'm using the Xbox One controller. Now follow the on-screen prompts. Once this is complete, this sets for the entire Retro Virtual Machine emulator, so it should work with all virtual machines you set up from here. And that's it. All that is left to do now, save the new MSX default setup we just made, and enjoy some amazing retro games on an excellent 8-bit home computer. We hope you enjoy many hours using this system, I know I have. The next video will be setting up the Amstrad CPC 464. We hope you'll join us for that. And with that, take care, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.